And welcome back, fellow football fanatics, to another weekly episode of Withdrawal Wednesday, where I take a handful of the questions you give me on our Discord server, the College Football with Sam Discord server, and I try my best to answer them on these Wednesdays. There's a link in the live chat right now, and before you do anything else, if you're here, I want you to click that link. You can also find it in the description to join my Discord server. Please then navigate to the hashtag YouTube mailbox channel and join it and type a question in that channel. Please and thank you. I appreciate it a lot. And then I will make your question into a video. I have this whole spreadsheet, this massive spreadsheet, where I keep all of the questions that are submitted in that channel. And we've gone through, I think, over 20 now. Certainly after tonight, we will have gone through over 20 user-submitted questions. I'm actually also going to ask all of you to do bold predictions in that YouTube mailbox as well, because it would be fun to talk about some bold predictions that you guys have. That would be incredibly fun, very creative way to do that would be through the hashtag YouTube mailbox channel on the Discord server. So do that, and also make sure, if you haven't already, to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. We had a few guests on this week behind the scenes, Rock Boys Football and Chris Drew. Those videos will be dropping in the next 24 hours, one tonight after the live show is done, the other one tomorrow morning. And we have some future guests coming on. So you will want to see my conversations with elite analysts in college football. And you'll also want to see when we go live Sundays, Mondays, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And when we release other content on a daily basis. We are a 24/7 operation here on College Football, Sam. Not literally. I make sure to rest. I make sure to recuperate, to relax. There are days that I take off, but I try the best to ensure that every day you all have something. Sometimes way more than just something. Some things, a plethora of content, but at least something to chew on, something to ponder, something to think about at least once a day. So thank you for the likes, the subscriptions. Share this video around on any platform that you can. And we're going to start off today talking about a lesser-known Big Ten school, and one that I think is underrated entering the season, actually. But not in the context of their football team, more so their program moving forward. I want to talk about why Indiana can graduate into the S tier. This was a question submitted actually by not an Indiana fan. This question was submitted by, Gyro, an Ohio State fan, who's very active in the Discord server. He's given me at least a 10th, if not more than that, maybe even closer to a 5th, like 20%, anywhere from 10 to 20% of the questions I've answered so far. And we've had several people ask questions. He just loves to ask questions. So I'm thankful to Gyro. Shout out to him for being active. Can Indiana graduate into the S tier of college football? That's what Gyro asks on this segment, where I take your questions and provide answers to them. Gyro asks, can Indiana graduate into Tier 1? I'm assuming he means as a program, but I'll also take it the football route as well, whether they can be a Tier 1 team and a true national championship contender in 2025. So let's answer both questions. And before we begin, please make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, comment your thoughts down below, and like the video, and watch it all the way through. That helps us get into the algorithm, and you'll get all the context behind my answer to his question. Ultimately, this is very complicated, answering whether or not Indiana can graduate into the S tier, which in tier listing jargon, tier listing is something that was popular on YouTube recently. I still think to a certain degree it's popular, and in the college football spaces, we all love the top 10 rankings, the top 25 rankings. Who do you think the top 50 players are in college football? We all love that stuff. Tier listing is that, but for everything. People will tier list ice cream, videos, TV shows. They'll tier list different types of burgers or food or countries to visit, or, I mean, even other things as well. The S tier in the tier list system is the best of the best. I think it's pretty much the same thing as tier 1 that people typically use in college football. Can Indiana graduate into that? Can they be, I'm going to answer it twofold because I don't exactly know what Gyro's asking here. Can they be a national championship contender this year? And can they also be a national championship contender in the future? I'm going to try and answer both. I think it's easier to answer whether or not they can this year because Indiana as a program historically has been quite crappy, if I'm being honest. But with what they have invested into Cignetti, keeping him and his staff in Bloomington after an amazing 11-2 campaign, and with how they were able to recruit after that 2020 season, I'm convinced that Indiana as a program has more potential than their history would, radiate off. Like, you see Indiana and you see how they're dressed, you look at their aura, you look at the waves they're giving off, and they can do better than that if you're looking at them from a historical perspective, I think. But we'll save that question for later, whether or not they can be a Tier 1 program. In terms of being a Tier 1 team, Indiana brings in Fernando Mendoza. Fernando Mendoza was one of the better quarterbacks last year, I think, especially in terms of NFL potential. And what I like about Mendoza is he's big, he's healthy, he has some mobility. He's going to be healthier than Curtis Rourke, who was playing with some half-torn ACLs last year. That explains why he wasn't mobile at all. And he has, I think, some high-tier NFL traits. I mean, look at his build, 6'5", 225 pounds, 16 touchdowns last year, 6 interceptions, a 144.6 passer rating, and he averaged almost 8 yards per pass attempt, and he took 41 sacks. Some of that probably was on him, but I would also say that his offensive line and his supporting cast overall was pretty pedestrian. His QBR was a 63.8, 55th nationally. He has a higher ceiling than Curtis Rourke, and I'm actually going to make a separate video on that topic as well. Indiana brings in Roman Hemby from Maryland, who's more talented than Justice Ellison, for example. And they also got Lee Beebe from UAB. Pat Coogan, who is one of the better centers in the country per Pro Football Focus, is going to be Indiana's new starting center. Bray Lynch and Drew Evans at guard come back, same with Carter Smith at tackle. Elijah Surratt returns at wide receiver. Kamara returns at defensive end, same with Tyreek Tucker at tackle. And they got 4 total defensive linemen in the portal. 2 D tackles, who were highly rated per Pro Football Focus, 2 D ends who also were, and then Kellen Wyatt was a Big Ten defensive end from Maryland. So some inter-conference or intra-conference transferring that cost Maryland and benefited Indiana. And just as recently as 2 years ago, like back in 2023, Maryland was a much better team than Indiana, viewed as a much better program as well. And now, I would say it almost couldn't be further from that, entering 2025. Amari Farrell and D'Angelo Pons at DB come back, same with Nicholas Radicic at kicker, and they upgraded in the portal, bringing in Mitch McCarthy at punter. Indiana can actually be better than they were in 2024, believe it or not. It may be hard to believe. I understand if you have skepticism towards that opinion, totally get it. But Indiana, make no mistake about it, could be one of the better teams in America in 2025. And when you look at their schedule is pretty bearable. Their non-conference is once again extremely weak. Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, Indiana State. They play a 9-game Big Ten conference slate like everyone else does, but that includes games against UCLA, Maryland, Purdue, whose win totals are 5.5 or lower. Same with Michigan State. Same with Wisconsin. Iowa and Illinois have 7.5 win totals about. Penn State and Oregon are the only ones at 10.5 or higher. Penn State has a 10.5. Oregon has a 10.5 as well. But neither of those teams are guaranteed to be what Ohio State was last year. The only one that is going to be close, in my mind, is Penn State on the road. Indiana's schedule is very workable. I think they'll start off the year, for example, as better than Oregon. Now, as the year goes on, with Oregon having a lot more talent and probably more Big Ten caliber depth, we'll have to see whether that holds or not. Something bothering my nose. My apologies for that. It was really bothering me. Felt like there was a bug crawling on it. We'll have to see whether or not that holds ultimately. But Indiana, I think, can be a Tier 1 team this year. And I think the fact that they return above 60% of their production, their preseason win total's 8.5 with a tougher schedule. So I don't think Vegas is expecting them to take a massive step back. A step back, yes, but a massive one, no. And I think that leaves room for a small chance that they'll be better in 25 than 24. And if they're better this year than last year, with how many teams at the top are losing a lot of players, that would translate to Indiana probably being close to a top 5 caliber team and therefore a Tier 1 team. So to answer that half of the question, can Indiana graduate into a Tier 1 team this season? My answer would be yes, especially since I also think they have a top 10, if not top 5 coaching staff in America. I really believe in Cignetti. I'm really high on them. When you look at a program basis and program standards, whether or not Indiana can graduate into the S-tier programs, that is more tricky. And in regards to that, I would have to say I am only going to believe it when I see it. Like, I have to see it before I can believe it. Because Indiana's been bad for so long, and while they have good NIL, that's why they were able to get Mendoza, they were able to get Hemby, that's why they were able to get some of the higher-level G5 transfers they got, and that's why they were able to get Jonathan Brady from Cal, power 4 wide receiver, in the spring portal window. It's not Texas, it's not Oregon, it's not USC, it's probably not even Michigan level, Ohio State level. They're not even in the top, they're not in the top 20, 25% of NIL collectives or of resources in the Big Ten, at least from what I know. Now, they have a massive alumni base, especially from their business school, which is rather large and successful. So I think they have more resources than people would care to admit, and more resources than a lot of programs who historically have been superior at college football than Indiana has. So I think in the future, especially if they keep Cignetti, they are going to move up in the college football program pedigree. Being a Tier 1 program, like a top 5 program in college football, I would have to see it to believe it. So on that part, I would say no. I would have to see Cignetti get top 15, top 20 recruiting classes at the bare minimum and occasionally get higher. And I would have to see him produce year over year over year over year. And those things take time. So the Indiana Hoosiers as a program are certainly on the rise. They are certainly, I think, going to be a better program in college football than a lot of people expect them to be, even right now. A lot of people, I think, are underestimating Indiana. So I think they'll be better as a program in the future. I think they'll be top 25, actually, as a program. Like, program-wise, top 25, which will be impressive for Indiana. And I think this season, they're certainly a Tier 2 team, maybe a Tier 1B team. They can certainly be a Tier 1 team and be a national championship contender this year, in my opinion. They could be one of those teams that breaks the blue chip ratio rule, because at some point, as even Bud Elliott, the inventor of the rule, has said, a team will do that if they have the right things happen, certain things fall in place, and especially if they have a talented quarterback and an elite coaching staff. And I think Indiana has those things. So if they can put it together this year especially, and maybe win some playoff games, their chances of becoming a Tier 1 program as well rise. But I don't think they have that potential right now. I need to see it before I believe it. In regards to them being a great program, little too early, but for being a great team, watch out. I don't think Indiana's going anywhere, at least for 2025. All right, moving on. And again, sorry about my nose. I don't know what happened there. I'll have to edit that out. Won't be a problem at all. But that was so bad. It was this nagging itch. That felt just as irritating as when Jack Tuttle was at the goal line of Illinois and he throws one of the dumbest interceptions I have ever seen. And yes, I am comparing Jack Tuttle to what felt like a fly. Wasn't good. Michigan's quarterback play was horrible. I actually turned off the TV in that game. Context-wise, we are talking about Michigan next, but side note, I turned off the TV in that game last year. It was just, boop, nope. Not watching us score 7 points against a team that was not even top 40 at the end of the day in power ratings. Just not worth it. Absolutely not worth it. But let's move on to Michigan. So this question came from an Ohio State fan, actually. See, Ohio State fans, it's so interesting. It's so fascinating. When I look at Ohio State fans, they either seemingly love me and really appreciate me, or they think that I am a Michigan apologist and that I'm a scumbag. Most of them, in my experience, are on the former half, where most of them really like me. And then there are, of course, because they're such a massive fan base and we're not at 100,000 subscribers or 1 million subscribers yet, not all of them know about me either. But it's really interesting. I mean, half of the questions that have probably been asked of me in the Discord server, that might be an exaggeration, but a huge portion of them have been Ohio State fans. They're really engaging. They're really passionate. So I just want to shut them out. And we'll actually be talking about Ohio State because someone did ask an Ohio State question. Another Ohio State fan. We have 3 Ohio State fans being represented in this Q&A session tonight. And only one Ohio State question. So they're asking about other programs as well and being inquisitive too, not just passionate and active. So applause to that behavior. This person, Toasty, active in my Discord server, he asks, are people too high on Michigan and Bryce Underwood? That's the question right there. Toasty, from the Discord server, an Ohio State fan, comes in and asks, why is everyone so high on Michigan football and Bryce Underwood? Trying to get some enemy intel. Intel on Michigan, the biggest rival of Ohio State, and both of whom participate in the greatest rivalry of all sports, the game. And the fact that Michigan and Ohio State, yet again, for the second time in the 2020s, technically for the third time, if you count the 2022 game as well, if you separate J.J. McCarthy's games and don't just count his tenure, Michigan and Ohio State are going to once again have a matchup where you have NFL quarterback on NFL quarterback or 5-star on 5-star. It's crazy. I love it. I think it's good for the sport. It's good for the Big Ten. It's wonderful for the rivalry. But Bryce Underwood is a true freshman. And Michigan did lose some talented players to the NFL draft. So people are asking questions about the team that went 8-5, 5-4 in Big Ten play, and also brought in a wonderful recruiting class. And there are questions that deserved to be asked about this Michigan team. Before I try to answer this, please subscribe, like the video, hit the bell, and also join the Discord server via the link in the description or down below in a reply to the pinned comment. Once you do that, navigate to the hashtag YouTube Mailbox channel and ask me a question. And on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, we will go live. And at some point this summer, the question you ask will be featured in what we call a Withdrawal Wednesday, where I reach into our mailbox, withdraw the mail that you've given me, and I answer a handful of questions every Wednesday night. Please do those things. I appreciate them. I don't know if people are too high. Depends on what you define as people in regards to how high the masses or certain individuals or maybe the analyst and pundit class are on Michigan football entering 2025. And you think of it this way. Their preseason win total's at 8.5. Now, it is juiced to the over, so Vegas is saying 9-3 is probably their most likely record. But it's with a schedule that is easier than last year's. And with what Michigan brings back, about 60% of their production, statistically, Michigan likely will improve with an easier schedule. So with only winning 2 more games than last year with an easier schedule, does that really mean people are higher on Michigan? or that maybe they're just projecting them to improve a little bit because of favorable returning production, a 5-star incoming quarterback who, even if he's average, is going to be better than Davis Warren, and their schedule's easier. I mean, look at Michigan's schedule, or at least listen. Since this is a question and answer session, just at least for now, I don't really bring up any fancier graphics in these shorter sessions, but I can read off the schedule to you. New Mexico in week 1, at Oklahoma week 2, that's going to be very tough. Central Michigan week 3, at Nebraska week 4, they get a bye in week 5. Then they host Wisconsin week 6, play at USC week 7, host Washington week 8, travel to Michigan State week 9, host Purdue in week 10, get a bye in week 11 before playing Northwestern in Wrigley Field, neutral site game in week 12. And then you have the annual trip to Maryland for Michigan in week 13 before they host Ohio State in week 14. That is a better schedule than last year, which included home game against Texas, home game against Oregon, road trip against top 10 Indiana, though we didn't know it at the time, and eventual national champion Ohio State. It's an easier schedule. It just is. And especially if you're talking about strength of schedule relative to the team that has said schedule. Davis Warren at quarterback, no matter what the defense had NFL talent-wise, that was always going to be rough against that schedule, especially with hindsight, which is 2020. Underwood and a more veteran O-line and a more veteran defense overall, though without the same unicorn talent at D-tackle, is going to be better suited for this schedule. So that's why their win total's at 8.5. Predicting at least 1.5 more wins than last season, more likely 2 more wins than just 1 more win. And I imagine Vegas would also think that 10-2 and maybe even 11-1 is more likely than 7-5 again, and certainly 6-6. But that's just me guessing. So again, I don't exactly know who is people, but what I can say is that Michigan fans are very bought into this team, bought in. I think Michigan fans believe that this team can win the Big Ten, that they maybe can win a playoff game or so. I know that fans of rival teams don't think that this Michigan team is all that special. Some of them think that Michigan will be worse than last year given all the NFL talent they lost. I know outsiders, kind of the neutral between the two extremes, think that this Michigan team can win anywhere from really 8 to 10 games, but that they probably won't win a playoff game. Some even say can't, and others think that subpar coaching will hold Michigan back because they do have a young staff and a staff that last year had many blunders. I would say the reason why people are high on Michigan and Underwood is the latter. It's Bryce Underwood. If Underwood is what the recruiting rankings say he is, number 1 overall player in the 2025 recruiting class, a quarterback that's compared to Vince Young, not just, we'll just slap Cam Newton on this recruit because he's generational and can move and can run. No, they also gave a Vince Young comparison. Others have given him Jaden Daniels comparisons. Bryce Underwood, if the Heisman Trophy were given to the best player every year, based on his recruiting rankings, services and analysts are telling you this is a Heisman caliber player, and that even as a true freshman, he should be one of the better players at his position in the country. Not one of the best. That would be crazy. That would be unforeseen. That would be Jeremiah Smith level. You don't get that every year. In fact, you don't get that most decades. But the point being that going from Davis Warren, a walk-on who had health issues that definitely held his career back, and I applaud him and I admire him for pushing through those, he is not the same player as Bryce Underwood, who's on the other end of the spectrum, healthy, big, sizable. I mean, what he did in high school, he made that look effortless at times, and he puts in effort, does his training, his due diligence, and he was courted and recruited by so many different schools, went to LSU because he saw what they did with Jaden Daniels, and then Michigan was willing to pay out a bunch of money to go and get him. Although that money, I think, shortly won't look like all that much. If Underwood does well at Michigan, they're certainly going to give him a raise, and will probably have to give him a raise if he does well. That's why I think people are high on Michigan and Underwood. It's for mostly Underwood, but some other reasons as well. Anyone who's high on the Wolverines will tell you that the defensive line is more likely to reload, then collapse because of how they've recruited, how they've developed, the fact that Rayshon Benny had a PFF grade close to Kenneth Grant and played several snaps last year, the fact that Michigan returns 3 defensive ends who had over 300 snaps, they return 4 senior linebackers, they return Yair Hill and almost all of their secondary minus Makari Page, who was okay last year, and Will Johnson, who was banged up for 2/3 of the year. And Wink Martindale seemed to figure things out towards the end of last year. So their defense should be top 10, if not top 5, based on projections, what they bring back, how that coaching staff finished out the year, and they massively upgrade talent-wise at quarterback and retool on the offensive line and running back through the portal and returning production. That's a lot of reasons to think that Michigan's going to be good this year. Not saying they will be, but some people are high on Michigan, and that's okay. In terms of the general consensus, I don't think people are too high on Michigan. I think the proud supporters, the proud haters, those in between, I think the mean and median opinion on Michigan is probably just about right, if I'm being honest. Expecting them to win 8, 9, 10 games, be a college football playoff contender, but not a national championship contender for 2025. Moving on, it's time to talk about Nebraska. This is a very interesting question from LSU VS Farr, who came up with that name. He actually, I don't know if he wants me to share this, actually, so I'll refrain from it. But there's an interesting backstory behind his name that I think is pretty cool. Active in the Corn Crazed Social Club Discord server, which if there is a way to join it, you should join. Very awesome. The Nebraska fan base, I think, is the best fan base in America. It's not the biggest, but they show up even when their team is trash. And many of them would die for their team. That's how dedicated they are. LSU VS Far is one of my favorite people to talk to in the Discord server. Very analytical, cerebral. I love the thought that he gives to his questions and the opinions that he gives. LSU VS Far asks, is there a limit to Nebraska's success without a recruiting identity? Love to talk to LSU VS Far. Honored that you asked this question. I'm going to try my best to answer it. So, Nebraska, if you look at their 2025 recruiting class, 20th overall, 13th in the portal, 22nd in the composite. And overall, they got 37 commits with an average rank per recruit of an 88.64. They right now have 13 enrollees and 7 signed letters of intent. They only had 20 high school players, almost as many transfer portal players. And if you break it down by state, 6 from Nebraska, 2 from Kansas, 2 from Missouri, 2 from Texas, and then 1 each from California, Colorado, Florida, and Hawaii. Also Kentucky, North Dakota, South Dakota, Utah. Really focusing in on recruiting the middle of the country. Nebraska, 6, Kansas, 2, Missouri, 2. That puts you at 10 right there. And then Colorado, 11, and then North Dakota, South Dakota, that's 13. Almost 75% of their recruits, definitely over 2/3, came from the plain, or at least around 2/3, came from the plains or the area surrounding the plains, states bordering the plains. And more of them from the north or the middle of the country, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, the Dakotas, than Texas, where they only got 2. Their 2 recruits from Texas were Bryson Weber, a 3-star corner who's an 89 overall, only 1 overall higher from a 4-star. And you also had Malcolm Simpson, who is a 91 overall player on the defensive line, 6'3", 255 pounds from Hitchcock. I think what LSU VS Far is asking here is that Nebraska used to recruit more in Texas. And Fox, whether it's Joel Klatt and Gus Johnson, used to always talk about this, especially during the Scott Frost era. I imagine they still talk about it here and there. And others have pointed out that ever since leaving the Big 12, Nebraska's recruiting identity has kind of, it's been unstable, and it's not been good, and it has not played well to their program. Now, certainly there have been more things than recruiting that have gone poorly for them. I mean, Frost recruited top 25 classes and then just couldn't develop them. Then you look at the 2026 recruiting class where Nebraska's teetering on almost being outside the top 70. It's very early in the cycle. I imagine Nebraska is going to be a team that rises and gets some better recruits as the 2026 recruiting class goes on. But right now they only have one player from Nebraska, the 11th best player. And many other players in that state right now are committed, the better players particularly, to Iowa State, including the number 1 overall player in Nebraska for 2026 quarterback, Jet Thamala, who's a 90 overall player, almost a top 200 level player. When you're Nebraska and your home state doesn't produce elite level talent, and you're trying to go after elite level talent, but you also want the homegrown kids because that's a part of your tradition and they give you some insurance. Just listening to that already is very complicated. And this is something I want to do more research on. But just intuitively answering that question, I do think Nebraska's recruiting limits their success. I do. I talked about this with a friend of the channel, a close friend of the channel, who I would consider a college football expert and knows more than I do on a lot of things. And he thinks that Nebraska's the only blue blood currently who should not expect to win a national title. Because in his own mind, in his own words, paraphrasing here, they don't have the recruiting footprint to get top-tier talent. Think about Michigan or Penn State or Ohio State, or heck, even a program like Washington, who isn't a blue blood but a member of the Big Ten. Those teams, their home states produce better football than Nebraska does, and oftentimes by a mile. I mean, Bryce Underwood, Dante Moore, 2 quarterbacks I'm going to be talking about in the live segment where I'm answering this question. Live, by the way, on Sundays, Mondays, and Wednesdays. Subscribe and hit the bell so you can get notified when we go live there. Love to have you viewers of these videos on my live shows more consistently. Anyway, they came from Michigan. We'll be talking about those quarterbacks in this upcoming segment or two. In Ohio, they've produced, like Sonny Styles, for example, produced Tavian St. Clair. They have produced even some lower level 3-stars, like, for example, Rod Moore, who went to Michigan and became an NFL safety. Washington produced JT Tuimoloau, Emeka Egbuka. I'm mainly listing off higher caliber Big Ten players, and obviously a lot of them are Ohio State players because Ohio State and Oregon are the best recruiting programs. And then obviously we know USC, another great recruiting program in the Big Ten, talking about a Big Ten context mostly, and they have California. Nebraska right now has the issue of, if you want to get into Texas, both A&M and Texas right now are sort of peaking with Elko and Sarkisian. You also have Kansas with Lance Leipold, who's doing better. Iowa State just reached a Big 12 championship game, and Campbell's consistent, is able to put some guys here and there in the NFL. I imagine the Brock Purdy success story gives him a boost. Iowa is an NFL factory. Nebraska's surrounded by schools that have been better than them in recent memory and have produced more in the NFL. I mean, even think of Colorado. Colorado hasn't been that far behind Nebraska since 2016. They have not. They have not. So that combined with being in a state, in a region where there isn't a lot of top talent bordering you or in the state you reside, that's a bad combination. So what Nebraska can do to grow their recruiting footprint and to grow their recruiting identity, I think, is just a win. You win more with the blue blood status you have, with the NIL, with the resources, then I think Nebraska will open doors that have not been opened yet, that could be opened, but just haven't been opened because since you haven't won a lot, well, they haven't let you in the door yet, or you haven't been able to go on that winning journey and find that necessary key to unlock the doors that you need to unlock to then win at the next level, to compete for championships again as Nebraska. But some of this is also outside of Nebraska's control. I mean, think about it. 2026 recruiting class. Nebraska typically tries to get a lot of in-state guys. They actually did a decent job of doing that under Frost some years. And then in the final years, where his recruiting really fell off, and it was obvious he was toward the end, they really failed at keeping the in-state guys. And for the 2026 class in Nebraska, the number 1 overall player is committed to Iowa State, and then number 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10, the top out of all the top 10 players in the state of Nebraska for 2026, only 3 of them are uncommitted. The rest are committed to either Iowa State or Northwestern. 2 are crystal balled to Nebraska, though, but still, it's probably not good enough. But Nebraska may be able to flip some of those guys. I'm not a recruiting expert either, but go back to 2024's recruiting class, which was 18th in the composite and got Dylan Raiola. They had 9 players from Nebraska, 9 of them, best being Carter Nelson, and then the next best, you had to go to Daniel Kalin, who's already transferred out. Well, not the next best quite, but, well, no, the next best recruit they got from Nebraska, yes, not the next best recruit in the state of Nebraska overall, but you get the point. They got a lot of good players from high school in that class, and the better players were from Texas, they were from Iowa, they were from Florida, Hawaii, Georgia, which is where Dylan Raiola came from. Buford, Georgia is where he was in his final year. Nebraska is a good insurance policy. The state is for Nebraska Cornhuskers recruiting. And that's why you want to keep it. And that's why the 2026 class, I think, is a bit of a concern, because a lot of those in-state kids are going to Iowa State and offensive linemen's going to Northwestern. But at the same time, if you want to recruit nationally, if you want to level up your game, well, maybe keeping some of the in-state guys, maybe you have to let some of them go as you win, because relying on talent in the Plains, especially the northern section of the Plains, is not going to win you Big Ten championships, most likely, unless you have the best developmental staff in America, and that's rare. And sometimes the best developmental staff in America at a given point isn't even Nick Saban caliber, or it's not what I think Penn State's staff is right now, or what Michigan's was in 2023. Different years are different years. Sometimes it's an up year or a down year for coaching or for roster talent or for depth. We're kind of in a down era right now because of the transfer portal for depth overall. So, long-winded answer to your question, I think, but it's important. LSU VS his question was, does Nebraska's recruiting identity limit them? Verbatim it was, is there a limit to Nebraska's success without a recruiting identity? And my answer to that is yes. Nebraska has to identify as a national power. You get there by winning, and then when you're winning, you start to recruit at a national level. And you can have pipelines where you get the best players in your own home state, and you try to develop players that way. You get developmental pieces locally. Of course, use that to your advantage. But you got to recruit nationally as well, and if that means in 2026 they miss out on a lot of Nebraska guys, but they get more Texas guys, more Florida guys, more Sunbelt guys, maybe they go out to California or the West Coast and get some guys, or go to the DMV area, get some players, or get more Kansas and Missouri guys, and they finish with a better overall class, and those players win more than classes that had more Nebraska kids, it's worth it. I think that your recruiting identity either being wide open or it's solely mostly being built off of homegrown in-state talent from Nebraska as it stands right now is going to limit your success if you are Nebraska. Maybe I'm wrong, but yes, there is a limit to Nebraska's success without a recruiting identity. They are not getting the players they need to win Big Ten championships, especially with the staff they have, which I think is good, but not one of the best in America, at least yet. They have to do more winning to prove that, and if they do win more, and they do prove that they're one of the best in America developmentally, then I think there will begin to be an identity to their recruiting, because it will be easier to recruit nationally, and I think Matt Rule wants to recruit at a national level. Good question. On to the next one. This one's fascinating because it's about Ohio State. And this question comes from DeMoney5675. Again, an Ohio State fan. So DeMoney5675 asks, how does Ryan Day get rid of his Michigan demons? That's a great question. That's a fantastic question. So DeMoney5675 is an Ohio State fan, very passionate, and with Ohio State under Ryan Day being 1-4 against Michigan and Day having a negative 46-point differential in totality in his most recent 4 losses to the Wolverines, want to clarify that. It's not counting the one win. That's just negative 46-point differential versus Michigan in the 2020s. Should have added that in there because now people are going to go in the comments and say, well, actually, it's because they won by 29 points in 2019. Well, actually, it's 17 points, which still negative 17 points as Ohio State's coach with the recent history they've had against Michigan in the 21st century. Not good whatsoever. So that's a good question. Again, DeMoney675 or 5675, Ohio State fan, and verbatim his question was, how does Ryan Day get rid of his Michigan demons? How does he? Answer in the comment section down below, and make sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and also hit the notification bell too for the Ohio State podcast that's linked in the description. That way you get notified whenever we talk about Ohio State football, because that podcast is essentially a playlist for all of my Ohio State football content, or maybe it's talking about my Big Ten predictions video, which is releasing by the end of the week, that will be included in that podcast. Anything relating to Ohio State will be in that podcast. I think how Ryan Day gets rid of his Michigan demons is, number one, he plays his game. I think that Day, ever since, I don't know exactly how to put it, but I think that he inherited a lot of pressure from Urban Meyer, because Urban Meyer never lost to Michigan. And that was very impressive. At the same time, we also have to acknowledge that Urban Meyer never played a 21, 22, or 23 caliber Michigan team. He just never did. He played now some Brady Hoke Michigan teams. He played some Jim Harbaugh teams that were not as good as the 21 through 23 teams. I think most of the recent Michigan teams in 21, 22, and 23 beat a lot of the Urban Meyer teams, especially the 23 Michigan team, who I think would have beaten any of the Urban Meyer teams. I think they would have beaten all of them. Maybe you disagree. If you do, totally entitled to that opinion. But I think they do. So, number one, it's the fact that he has to change his expectations. And he has to be willing to win or lose the game on his own terms. It feels like, whether 21, but especially 22 and 24, that he was trying to LARP as Urban Meyer. That, he wanted to be this guy and this coach who would be physical. He would run the football. And by be physical, I don't mean be physical in the sense of what physicality actually is, which is toughness. You don't get worn down. You wear down your opponent. Ryan Day clearly thinks that physicality is O-line play, running back play, interior trench play. And those are good things to prioritize. But against Michigan, you saw, especially on offense, and really only on offense, Jim Knowles called a perfect game in that matchup. You saw that he truly thinks that toughness is about running the ball. That's what he thinks toughness is. Straight up. And I don't think, that's mainly a Michigan thing, but you also saw against Texas and against Notre Dame where they ran the football a lot, and especially against Texas, maybe they would have been better off passing it at times. Maybe. I know against Notre Dame, they ran it, and then later in the game, they kind of sputtered out a little bit. So, and almost allowed Notre Dame to come back. Of course, they won the national title, and I think Ryan Day's a good coach, but he does have a Michigan problem. And I think the biggest problem he has is that he expects genuinely that Ohio State should always beat Michigan. That's not reality. You should want to always beat Michigan. You should try your best to always beat Michigan. And if you do, well then awesome. You have never lost to Michigan. And it should be the same thing with Michigan, too. Always want to beat Ohio State. Always try to. Always work hard to get there. But to genuinely think in your mind that you should, and maybe in some cases will, always beat them, always beat your biggest rival, that's completely counterintuitive to the narrative and the correct narrative that this is the greatest rivalry in college football and potentially in sports history. If it is that great, Ohio State will not win every year. Michigan will not win every year. This is why I think eventually Ohio State will beat Michigan again, even though Michigan is completely within their head and takes the game, I would say, almost more personally than Ohio State does, the way that they play. In last year's game, a lot of it was bad Ohio State schematics, but Michigan's O-line did a better job pass blocking. They did a better job run blocking. They did a much better job on their D-line getting to Will Howard than Ohio State's D-line did getting to Davis Warren. They hit harder. They were more solid in coverage. They were smarter in coverage. They committed PI against Jeremiah Smith because they couldn't stop him otherwise, and Ohio State would commit PI against Michigan's wide receivers when the ball on that trick play, for example, is thrown so poorly that you should just turn around and catch the ball. Don't commit PI. It's a lot of these little things, and I think, while not all of it is mental, because Michigan finally stepping up and taking the rival personally in a way they hadn't before plays a part, but Ohio State also used to take it personally, and they used to play it in a way that I have never really seen Ryan Day play it that way. I mean, I don't know. In 2019, did Ohio State win that game because they took the rivalry more seriously than Michigan, even in Day's first year with Urban's players? Or was that just because that Ohio State team was so good and talented there was no way they were losing to Michigan for the first time in several years? I don't know. I think that a lot of it is it's him. He's in his own head about it. He compared losing to Michigan to losing his own father, and that's horrible. It's horrible because he doesn't deserve to feel that way. It's bad. And it's also just wrong. And I'm not going to put myself in Ryan Day's shoes because I don't know him. However, I can say that as a Michigan fan who wants to win the game every year, and I imagine that Michigan coaches and past Ohio State coaches, many of them probably would admit that losing a family member is worse than losing at the end of the day what is a game. That's something that has to be fixed. If he forever thinks that losing to Michigan after experiencing it that many times is that emotionally destructive, well, he's going to play it safe every time. And Ohio State's not going to approach that game in the way that they need to probably win, with that edge to them, with not having anything to lose. The only time I've seen that from a Ryan Day team against Michigan was 2023, when they were an underdog, a spread underdog, where you didn't just have anecdotes of people saying, oh, Michigan's going to beat Ohio State. You had Vegas for the first time since 2018, when Ohio State also stepped up and played well above their predicted weight class, Vegas confidently saying the line never moved even when everyone was betting on Ohio State. Vegas saying, yeah, Michigan's going to win, and you can bet as much money as you want. We don't think Ohio State's going to win. And then Ohio State played with that edge. Even with a guy like Kyle McCord, who was rightfully criticized, they played with that edge, and they nearly won. They outgained Michigan in that game on the road and fought valiantly. So that's number one. Long-winded answer, I know, but I think it was needed. That's number one. He has to get out of his own head. Has to. He has to view the game for what it is. A game that's very important, a game that might even get you fired, even if you're successful but don't win it. But at the same time, it's not a life-altering spiritual disaster if you lose. It's not. We saw that last year. I mean, Ohio State lost the game and then won the title. In 2023, they lost the game and didn't have an opportunity to make the title, but they won 11 games. And if they played in the Cotton Bowl with any sense of pride, they would have won 12. Come on. So that's number one. And then number two, I think, is more of a team mentality issue. And this also falls on Ryan Day. But when I look at Ohio State's players and how they've taken the game in previous seasons, it feels like they view Michigan as little brother. Like how Michigan viewed Michigan State under D'Antonio. Like, oh, at some point we're just going to kick your butt. And we're the better program than you. We always have been. We always will be. And we're just going to own you and beat you because we're Ohio State and because you're Michigan. Not because we're better than you on the field. Not because we're going to be better than you this specific Saturday in November, the final Saturday in November. Not because we're going to be better at playing the game and doing what is necessary to win the game than you. We're better than you just because of who we are. That is the lamest mentality one could have, is that because of their immutable characteristics, they are better than you because your immutable characteristics are different. That is not just wrong, and in another world of conversation about that thing, discriminatory. It's just stupid. It's lame. It's beyond lame. Ohio State and Michigan can't control their past. All they can do is control the future, play to their strengths to maximize their chances of winning in the future. And with Ohio State, it feels like they always hearken to what they want the game to be and what they think the game should be based on their past success or their recent history in the game, rather than trying to do whatever it takes to win. Michigan beat Ohio State in 21 by ramming the ball down their throat. They beat them in 22 using explosive plays and looking more like Ohio State on offense than Ohio State did. They won in 23 with defense, interceptions, kicking field goals, and not running the ball down Ohio State's throat, but running it for 3 to 4 yards per carry and chewing clock. Last year, they won it off of mentally breaking the quarterback and mentally breaking the head coach and hanging around and then winning with a field goal with the kicker who's basically automatic from 50. They have won in a variety of different ways over the past 4 years. Ohio State, meanwhile, in 22 and 24, in my mind, tried a lot of the same stuff and mentally on the field looked just as frustrated and just as angry and to a certain degree just as entitled when they weren't crushing Michigan and they melted down and you had the same mental issues. And then in 21, to a certain degree, I don't think Ohio State could have done anything to win that game with how bad the defense was. But at the same time, there were play calls made and there were comments made after the game where it was like, yeah, they expected to win just because they were Ohio State. And that they kind of got shocked when they realized they weren't going to win or that they weren't favored to win and that they really had to make a comeback here. The mentality of Ohio State in relationship to Michigan now is much different than it was under Urban Meyer. The language is the same, whether it's the team up north or, we're going to beat them hard and we're going to earn this for the state of Ohio and all the traditional stuff, all the jargon. That's the same, but the mentality's not the same. I've watched Urban Meyer teams play Michigan teams, and the edge was different. The edge, in fact, was flipped. Michigan thought that they were going to win eventually just because they're Michigan, and Ohio State had like that work ethic where every game they found a way to exploit Michigan's weaknesses, and they would win whether it was an 18 in a shootout, 17 and 16 in defensive battles, in 15 by ramming down their throat, in 14 by surviving, 13 in a shootout and making a stand at the end of the game with a defense that allowed a ton of points, but who stepped up to stop the 2-point conversion in 2012 through an awesome second half lockdown performance. Seriously, how Ryan Day can get rid of his Michigan demons is stop trying to be something you're not. Be yourself, live by the sword, die by the sword. Live by your game plan. Do what you're good at. Throw the ball across the field. If it is necessary for you to win the game by running it 5 times and passing it 40 times, you do that. If it is necessary for you to win the game by running 70 plays and not chewing clock at all and just up-tempoing all the time like your 2022 USC, or maybe that's not the appropriate analogy, but you're high-flying, you're all offense, no defense, do that. Do whatever it takes to win the game. Number one. So let go of the ego, the need to live up to a standard of someone who isn't there, and a standard you will never live up to because you lost to Michigan 4 times. You'll never live up to Urban Meyer having that undefeated record, so stop trying to. And then number 2 is correct the locker room mentality. Don't let Denzel Burke in 2023 say he didn't recognize anything special on Michigan's film. Instead, encourage him to say that Michigan's a really good team, but we're going to bring our all, and we're going to beat Michigan, or we're going to die trying. Those things will help Ryan Day get over his Michigan demons and eventually earn him a win over Michigan. Perhaps even a win streak over Michigan, even a winning record over Michigan. I mean, the game is tough, and Michigan had their worst season last year that they've had in quite some time. So it's not going to get easier for Ryan Day from here on out against Michigan. It's not. However, I think he's an elite enough coach with enough talent and enough acumen to where he will eventually beat Michigan again. Even if his mentality doesn't change around Michigan, even if he never gets rid of his Michigan demons, I think he'll beat Michigan again. Just because Ohio State's more talented, he's an elite coach, and at some point, I think they'll come around and win one. If he changes the mentality, then I'm far more confident that eventually he'll beat Michigan, and more confident that he'll win maybe a few games in a row against them. Again, fantastic questions that you guys are answering. And again, remember, at the end of the show, everyone, we're doing a 15-minute Q&A session. Super chats are encouraged if you want me to answer your questions. Send in a super chat, guaranteed answer. If not, just is what it is. It happens. We roll with it. No matter what we face, no matter what comes our way, we'll face it. And remember to subscribe, hit the notification bell, do those things. I appreciate it. Within the next few hours, there are going to be several videos dropping. The Rock Boys football collaboration video, the Chris Drew collaboration video, some Big Ten predictions, my reaction to ESPN's FPI and Indiana video. Daily content is here for you. Thank you very much for your time. Let's get to Oregon. This is a question that I wasn't planning on answering tonight, but I like talking about Oregon. I want to reach out to Oregon fans. I want to engage with them because they're one of the bigger fan bases in the Big Ten. They're new to the Big Ten, and I'm very high on Dan Lanning. I've already made that, actually. I made a video talking about why I think they are underestimated this year. No one is talking about Oregon. It's the weirdest thing in the world. I don't understand why. But anyway, I do want to talk about this question here, and it is from Sound of Illuminati. Very cool name. So Sound of Illuminati asks this question about Oregon, particularly as it relates to Dante Moore, assumed starting quarterback of the Oregon Ducks. How much less difficult do you think the Penn State game could be if Moore is just awesome, instantly, such as freshman Trevor Lawrence or Jeremiah Smith? Enough that if Aller manages to mess up late in the game like he did last year, it'd get the Ducks out with the win. So essentially, Dante Moore at the beginning of the year will be a top 10 quarterback. What if that happens? How would Dante Moore being at least elite for most of the year and starting out as a great quarterback like that? That's actually the first time I've documented myself snapping with my left hand, even if it was bad. Maybe I should give myself a pat on the back. How much would that change? Especially given the context that Oregon's outside the top 100 in returning production. They only return 43% of their production. And Dante Moore struggled at UCLA as a true freshman, and he sat behind Dylan Gabriel for a season. Taking all of that into consideration, that would change everything. That would make Oregon into a national championship contender, guaranteed. In fact, I will go even further and say that if Dante Moore is like freshman Trevor Lawrence, they will be a better team than what they were last season. Before I explain why that is, make sure, especially if you're an Oregon fan, because we need more of you, to like the video, hit the notification bell, also hit the bell on the Oregon Football Podcast in the description. That way you'll get notified whenever I talk about Oregon football. Give the channel a subscription. Comment your thoughts on Oregon's potential if Dante Moore is an elite quarterback down below. and join our Discord server via the link in the description or down below in a reply to the pinned comment, so that way we can engage with you more on college football with Sam. Thank you very much. It would change everything. To have Dante Moore being elite in a single year of him starting means a few things. A, Oregon is going to be a contender for not just this coming year, but a national title contender probably for the following year. I don't think that Moore having 1 year of that type of tape, of 2018 freshman Trevor Lawrence tape, would get him as high draft capital as he possibly could, just because of his freshman year, only starting for a year. He'd probably return for 26, and with all the youth that Oregon has, Oregon could be the number 1 team entering 26. It would certainly upgrade Oregon's potential, their talent profile. It would also help them win big games and even compensate for some of the issues on defense. You guys all know that I'm not high on Lupoy at all. If you've watched this channel, I think that Lupoy will have to be fired if Oregon wants to win a title under Dan Lanning. But if Dante Moore comes out and he is a top 5 quarterback and at some points possibly the best quarterback in America, well, there's always exceptions to the rule. I mean, Pete Golding never fielded elite defenses at Alabama. Never. And they won a title and nearly won another with him as a DC because they had Heisman caliber quarterbacks. They had elite wide receivers. They had some just freaks on defense that would compensate for what Golding did. And Golding's a good DC. I think he's better than what Lupoy is, but by no means is Golding an elite, one of the top DCs in America. His best DCs, his best defensive seasons have been with insane talent. And when he doesn't quite have that insane talent, his defenses are in no way top 5, certainly top 10. I think that the Penn State game is definitely in play, no matter what. But it's in no way going to be a Penn State runaway if Moore is that good. Penn State does have some questions on defense, especially depth-wise. I think their starters are some of the best, if not the best in America, but depth-wise at certain positions, they do have questions. And if Oregon also pans out at wide receiver and on the offense overall, in addition to Moore being potentially this Trevor Lawrence-level young quarterback, then they probably will score on Penn State's defense a little bit. Penn State has the edges in the current matchup, as we know. Moore is not proven. Many think he'll be worse than Drew Aller. Penn State has O-line continuity and superior recruiting and depth. They have better tight end depth, although Oregon is the best overall tight end potentially in college football. Penn State has better running backs coming back, and they upgraded at receiver in the portal, and Oregon upgraded through high school, and I think Moore is going to be really good. But Penn State, by the returning production numbers and the power ratings, especially per S&P Plus, will have the better offense. And then on top of that, you look at defense. We all know from looking at the Rose Bowl that Knowles is a much better D coordinator than Lupoy. You can even look at the first Oregon game. And both defenses got worked, not just Knowles' defense in that first regular season Oregon matchup. And I think that Penn State has denied Anna Sutton, A.J. Harris. They have about the same amount of NFL talent in terms of first-rounders. I know that Oregon is Mateo Uyunglele. Penn State actually would have more if both Harris and Denida Sutton are picked that high, and they've done a much better job recruiting and developing on defense. In terms of stars, not exactly, but in terms of finding fits and having a good culture on defense, developing and calling plays, they've been better than Oregon recently. That game, to me, looks like a game where, unless James Franklin has one of the worst games of his career and Lanning has one of his best, that looks to me like a Penn State win, and definitely one that could be in, double digits, 2, 3, even 4 scores, potentially. Not saying that's what will happen. More likely than not, Oregon loses, but it's not by more than a touchdown or 10 points or 14 points. However, I can see it getting ugly. If Moore is that good, the game probably doesn't get that ugly, especially as I think with Penn State's defense and some of the questions that they have and what Oregon has on offense in terms of potential and talent, that Penn State's defense will probably get better as the season goes on, It's better for Oregon to travel to Happy Valley, even if it's in the whiteout in September, October, than it is in November or in the playoffs. And then you look at some of their other games, like on the road against Iowa. You're not losing to Iowa on the road with Trevor Lawrence and the talent you have. If Moore's just average or even just good, that could be a loss. But with some of the questions Iowa has and their lack of talent, if Moore is that good, your ceiling isn't just risen. Your floor is, your floor is one of the highest in America, especially with the schedule. And there won't be a slow start to the season either if he starts off that hot, like there was in 2024. The near loss to Boise State, the near disaster against Idaho, which would have been the equivalent of App State beating Michigan. In fact, it may have even been worse because App State was the number 1 FCS team and Michigan was top 5. Oregon preseason was, I think, top 4. And I don't even think Idaho was preseason top 10 in the FCS, which is insane because that's one of the biggest, if not the biggest upset in college football, is that App State over Michigan win. So if Moore is elite, if he's a top 10, top 5 quarterback as a freshman, or even better than that, shows moments of being the best like Trevor Lawrence was in 2018, that changes everything. Oregon would immediately be I would say top 3 team guaranteed, if not top 2, if I know that Moore is that good, because they have so much talent that could pan out or that has panned out at other positions, to where plugging him in with that roster, assuming he is that good, if the question's answered in a positive manner, that means Oregon's going to destroy probably every team on their schedule except for Penn State on the road. And then you go to Indy, see what happens in Indy, and they would certainly win some playoff games. Certainly. So that's the answer to that question. Thank you for bringing it in. Really appreciate it. It would absolutely change everything. Don't know if it's going to happen. Would be inclined to say he's not going to be quite that good in year 1, but with his talent and with Oregon's system, it is possible. And I'm certainly leaning more towards him being elite than a total disaster. All right. Last but not least, before we get to the Q&A session, talking about whether or not Penn State's rushing or passing offense will be superior. So this question was asked by the Final Quarter. The Final Quarter, again, another Ohio State fan. They love to ask questions on my Discord server. He asks, what will be better, the Penn State rushing offense or the Penn State passing offense? This is a fascinating question, and I will give you an interesting answer, an answer that I think will be quite shocking for much of you. Penn State returns 76% of their 2024 offensive production, and they have the number 3 preseason offense per Bill Connolly's S&P Plus that was just updated about a week or 2 ago. I believe, I'm just going to answer this straight up and then give some justifications for it, that Penn State's rushing offense will be better. But I also think the passing offense, looking at the wide receivers, looking at Aller, looking at the tight ends, the running backs, and Kotelnicki, I think the passing offense, in terms of efficiency, will probably be top 10 in America. I just think the rushing offense is going to be number 1 in America. This is going to be one of the best offenses in the country for Penn State. Make sure, if you haven't already, before we resume, to subscribe, hit the bell, like the video, hit the bell for the Penn State football podcast as well, so you can get notified whenever I release another Penn State video. We've been talking about Penn State quite a bit here on College Football with Sam, and I love it because I'm very high on them, and I think I have very many reasons, a plethora of reasons, to be high on Penn State this year. Aller was top 20 in America in QBR last year, was more aggressive, took more risks, had above a 150 passer rating, did not do well in big games. He didn't. But being in Kotelnicki's system for a second year, I think, is really going to benefit him. Really going to benefit him. And then they bring in Trevor Pena, who had a little over 900 receiving yards. They bring in Devontae Ross, who had over 1,000 yards. Kyron Hudson had a few hundred. Luke Reynolds, Andrew Rappelia, and Khalil Dinkins, I think, are ready to step up a lot at tight end. Aller had 3,327 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 8 picks, and a 153.5 passer rating. I'd expect his passer rating to be in the 160s, maybe even 170s this year, depending on how the offense pans out. The reason I have the rushing offense as a superior unit is the Nittany Lions return center Nick Dawkins, Olia Vega Ione at guard, Cooper Cousins at guard, who played limited last year, close, I think, 5-star out of high school. Everyone's high on him and optimistic about him inside Penn State. And they returned 3 starting tackles, Nolan Rucci, Anthony Dunco, and Drew Shelton. Their O-line is loaded. Their second-string O-line would probably still be one of the better O-lines in college football. Not an elite one, maybe not even a great one, but it'd be better than a lot of starting O-lines in the Big Ten and the SEC, and that's saying something. Phil Trotween's done an amazing job there, and they only allowed Aller to get sacked 19 times last year. They had some issues in pass protection. They were elite in run blocking, and with all that returning production, they'll get better at run blocking in my mind. They'll get even better at pass blocking too. Singleton had 1,099 rushing yards for 6.4 yards per carry, 12 rushing touchdowns. He also had 375 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns on 41 receptions. They used him a lot as a receiver out of the backfield last year. Andy Korodnicki and his staff and Penn State did. I think he's going to have an even bigger year this year, if healthy. And he was sick for parts of last year and dinged up. Katron Allen had 1,108 rushing yards, 5 yards per carry, and 8 touchdowns. In total, Penn State ran for 5.3 yards per carry last year, for 35 touchdowns, and for 3,237 rushing yards. There is a great chance, given all the potential games they could play in, 16 games, even 17 games, and with all those offensive linemen returning, the running backs returning, even the depth running backs returning, and with Aller likely continuing to get stronger, faster, and leaner, there's a chance this team could run for more than 4,000 yards. There's a chance of that. They could be that dominant on the ground. So I think the rushing offense will be better. The passing offense I still think will be great. I think it'll be much more effective than it was in 2024 by a mile. But the rushing offense will improve too. And I love what I see from Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen. I like what I see from Corey Smith, Quinion Martin Jr. I love the room, the running back room, and the offensive line. And I think the tight ends are really good blockers too, and there should be better blocking at wide receiver as well. This offense for Penn State could be the best offense in college football. It won't be 2019 LSU stylistically. It won't in terms of having those elite receivers. It won't be 2021 Ohio State in that regard either, or the 22 Buckeyes, or even last year's Ohio State. But what it could be, what this offense could be, is think about Michigan's 2022 rushing offense. Think about it. Except Singleton is probably a better NFL back than either of those. So think about potentially Saquon Barkley in 2022 Michigan's offensive line group and tight end group, where they averaged well over 5 yards per carry. And then Katron Allen's better than Donovan Edwards. And then imagine that situation, basically the 2022 Michigan offense, the rushing offense, with a 2023 level Michigan passing offense, where they converted third downs very effectively, had a wide receiver in Roman Wilson who at least got drafted on day 2, maybe several day 2 guys. It's probably a better wide receiver than Michigan's in 2023. Maybe it's the equivalent of Ohio State's in 2023 when Ibuka was injured. Maybe, 3 great wide receivers or 3 good ones make up for 1 elite one kind of thing. Not going to exactly make that comparison, but the 23 Michigan offense was incredible efficiency-wise. The 22 rushing offense was incredible, although not the passing offense that was wildly inconsistent. If you combine the best of both worlds there, and then maybe took the average of Michigan and Ohio State's 2023 wide receiver rooms, so a better wide receiver room than Michigan had in 23, but worse than what Ohio State had because they don't have a Marvin Harrison Jr. That's what I think this Penn State offense could be. And that, I think, would project as the country's best offense, depending on how Clemson pans out, depending on how Ohio State pans out. But even then, they return a lot more than Ohio State does. And while they return less than Clemson, they're much more secure along the offensive line than Clemson is, and much more secure at running back. They will be better able to run a balanced attack on offense than Clemson will be. So this will be an elite offense this year. I have no doubts about that. And I think the rushing offense will have more to do with that. But on third downs and when they need to convert, I do think the passing offense will work their magic, especially with Trevor Pena, Devontae Ross, and then Drew Allard being in the second year of Andy Kotelnicki's system. Great questions, guys. We're done with that. And now we'll do a 10-15 minute Q&A session. That's what I'll do. And just if you have any super chats or anything of the like, just any questions that you have, ask me. And I will do my best to answer. Then we'll close out the show. Got a decent amount of views turning in, or viewers coming in. It's pretty fun talking about all these different things. I enjoyed it. Really did. Thank you, guys. And make sure, if you haven't already, join the Discord server. Please. Join the Discord server. Would really appreciate it. Link in the description. Join the Discord server and ask me a question in the YouTube mailbox section. It is, believe me, it really is that simple. Just do it. Thank you very much. And next Wednesday, we'll have a new batch of questions. Just uploading a video from today that I made. There we go. Okay. Let's pop out the chat and answer some questions for y'all. Again, super chats are preferable, but they're not a requirement. Do this for 10-15 minutes. Okay. Let me see any questions that people have had. Okay, they start right here. Sam, do you believe in Joe Hendry? Who's that? I have not heard of this Joe Hendry. Professional wrestler. I had no clue who he is. So, I guess my answer to that is no. I don't believe in him. Okay. What do you think UCLA's ceiling is with the Tino plus Nico combo? It is much higher than it was before Nico got there, I'll tell you that. I had UCLA at one point pegged at 2-10. I don't have them pegged there anymore. You'll have to see where I'm predicting them to fall in the Big Ten when my predictions video releases rather soon. But their ceiling's pretty high. I mean, let's go over their schedule here. So UCLA's schedule for 2025 is Utah at home in week 1, UNLV on the road in week 2, New Mexico week 3 at home, bye in week 4, at Northwestern week 5, hosting Penn State week 6, at Michigan State week 7, Maryland in week 8 at home, Indiana on the road week 9, bye in week 10. Week 11 they host Nebraska off a bye, they travel to Ohio State week 12, host Washington week 13, play at USC week 14. I would imagine this team is going to be an underdog in 8 or 9 of their regular season games. They can probably go anywhere from 2 to 3 games over that. Maybe even 4, because having an elite quarterback can compensate for being the far worse team. If you have, a great quarterback, your opponent just is a mediocre quarterback, even if the rest of your opponent's roster is way better than the rest of your roster. And I think I'm losing my voice here a little bit. I have to make sure to drink some water after the show. If Moore beats Ohio State, but goes 6-6 or 7-5, does he still get fired? I would say yes. If you go 6-6 and beat Ohio State, I would say Yeah, I'd say he'd get fired or he'd certainly be on the hot seat. If he goes 6-6, there's no reason for Bryce Underwood to not leave. This team should be way better than the Michigan team of last year. Even losing all of that NFL talent with the depth pieces they bring back, the QB they bring in, and the new staff. And by new staff, it's really just one new staffer, but still a huge upgrade at OC. They should do better than 7-5. 7-6 shouldn't even be on the radar for this team. Doesn't mean it's impossible or that Michigan can't go 6-6. But I mean, if I had to make a decision, if he goes 6-6 with this schedule, yeah, I would fire him. I would fire him. Absolutely. Thunder Redmond Michigan football show. What if Penn State beats Ohio State by 14 points? What does that mean for Ryan Day when he has to coach the Michigan game? Well, I mean, I would say if he loses to Penn State by 14, he probably loses to Texas, and that means he enters the Michigan game with 2 losses, which means, since it's the 12-team playoff, that Ohio State's game against Michigan is probably a playoff elimination game, essentially. I would say all the pressure comes back for Day. That's what I would say. And Michigan's probably not entering the game undefeated. So Ohio State would be probably a 9-2 favorite in the game, with potentially a spot in Indianapolis and certainly a spot in the college football playoff on the line. That's what that would mean. And I know for a fact there'd be a certain contingent of Ohio State fans who would want him to make major staff changes if Penn State were to beat him by double digits, for sure. Okay, let's see what more questions you guys have. Got 30 concurrent viewers. Everyone who's on here, make sure to hit the bell. Segment's almost over. If you're just catching up, well, then you'll see this later. But make sure to hit the bell so you get notified when we go live Sundays, Mondays, and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. And also join the Discord server via the description. And that way you can be a part of the awesome College Football with Sam Discord community. And you can ask me questions in the YouTube mailbox channel. I'd really appreciate that. And if you do have a super chat to ask a question, because that way it'll get a guaranteed answer, send it in. Chris Lane, nice to have you on here. Thank you for being a moderator. I appreciate your dedication to the channel and your support always. One of my favorite people to talk to. What happens to Luke Fickell if Wisconsin finishes under 500? I don't even want to think about that. I do not even want to think about that. It just, because I love Luke Fickell, and I think that Fickell long-term at Wisconsin will succeed. But another year under 500, when they didn't go 500 since the earlier Barry Alvarez years, means he's certainly on the hot seat entering 26, could even mean he gets fired. I don't know, though, because Wisconsin, I think, is the toughest schedule in America this year. So I have, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 5 teams on Wisconsin's schedule pegged as top 10 teams. 5 of them. I have 1 additional team pegged as top 25. So 6 top 25 teams. And then I have 1, 2, I have 8 total teams who I think will be like in the top 30, 35, 40 range or better. Now, I also think Wisconsin will be in that range or better. And I think they'll be more top 30 than just top 40. But at the same time, it's a very tough schedule. You don't get many breaks. You thankfully get 2 byes. If Fickell finishes under 500 at Wisconsin, I would hope they keep him for another year, as long as it's 5-7, or the team looks about, better than last year, but just because of the tougher schedule, couldn't win games. But he'd certainly be on the hot seat. Let's say the furthest Moore goes is the first round of the CFP and 1 or 2 appearances in the Big Ten Championship game. What is the likelihood Underwood doesn't transfer? If Moore reaches the playoff or 1 or 2 appearances in the Big Ten Championship game, I don't think Underwood would transfer. I don't think so, because being in Indy and getting to the CFP, even if you lose in the first round, you're still competing for titles, and you're still winning the conference, and you're probably still beating Ohio State in this scenario. And that means the offense is good enough to where Underwood gets to, get NFL draft buzz. So in that scenario, I don't think he'd leave at all, personally. But if Michigan were to not reach the playoff and not compete for championships, then the likelihood would increase. I think if Underwood is developed poorly and he senses that, he will leave. I think it's the same with Dylan Raiola at Nebraska, by the way. If somehow Holgorsen doesn't pan out, then there is a likelihood that Raiola will say, dude, I need to go to the NFL. I'm going to go somewhere that will develop me for my final 2 years or so. Another question from the Thunder Redmond Michigan football show. What does James Franklin need to do to break his Ohio State curse? He needs to get out of the way of his own players, as DeMoney5675 said, and he needs to ensure that the current staff he has stays with him, because I think it's the best staff in America. Who will have the better running back room, Ohio State or Michigan? Oh my gosh, this is tough. I'm actually going with Michigan this year just because Justice Haynes and the talent he has, and the fact that I think Michigan's run blocking O-line will be better than Alabama's, and the style Michigan plays will suit him and Marshall pretty well, but it's close. I'd say in 2026, you're probably looking at Ohio State having the better running back room just because they've recruited much better there, and once they get some of those true freshmen, some reps, and some training, I am very high on Ohio State in basically every position in 2026. I think Ohio State's just a year away, and I think that maybe what I think of their running back room could even be the epitome of that. Thank you, Evie, for asking that question. The epitome of that, in the sense that they're good, they're great, they're close, but they're also a distance away from being the best in the country. Good questions, guys. All right, I probably have time for one more. Oh, this is a good question. Does Jim Knowles get offered an NFL/head coaching job at the end of this year? I don't know, because his defense that he likes to run, which is ideally a 3-man D-line, like the 3-3-5 is his thing. He likes that. And just the style of defense he runs, I don't know, and I don't think that's an NFL-style defense. I know that Duke was trying to get him to be their head coach, but they chose Manny Diaz instead, another defensive mind. I'm going to say there will be buzz, but I'm going to say no, that he won't be offered a job. And that is just because he's older, and I don't think his style fits with the NFL, even though I think it's a wonderful style for college. It's like what Chris Lane just said. Knowles isn't an NFL guy. Chris Lane, thank you for the $2 super chat. We have Bo Jackson, LOL. Yeah, I have Bo Jackson as a breakout player for Ohio State this year. I think he's going to be pretty darn good. And I think especially that will be the case at the end of the year, as wear and tear happens with every roster, and as he gets better with more training and more practice. I think Bo Jackson's going to be an awesome Ohio State running back in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. These 6 clips will be up in the following days along with more content. I will see you all very soon. Have a wonderful day. Stay tuned.